See,
So how long have you been at that
Although-
place, Alex?
So I've been working with Corazon for just over a year now. I started last 2 Septembers ago now. Yeah, so it's been great. We're really excited because we're at least able to do some things in person, or we at least were for a little while there. But this is great. We're sort of in a hybrid mode now, right? Where we can be communicating across great distances, but also trying to gather in person, just balancing what the community is needing right now.
but does your community have, a lot of access to internet?
No, so that is one of the limitations. We knew, when we were all online, there were folks that we were just not getting. A lot of folks did get more access to internet through schools, right? Because schools were giving out hotspots and Chromebooks. But that's starting to go away now as things are back to in person. So we're seeing those digital divides are still pretty persistent, unfortunately.
Yeah,
How
I
about
can
the cell
imagine.
phones?
And they don't have, no, because it's so expensive, right? They don't get on. It's
Yeah.
not like Mexico. In Mexico, you get a lot of free sites. It's cheaper actually.
Yeah, but we'll put it on YouTube, and we have found that that at least is a bit more accessible even than Zoom for some folks. So we're hoping that we'll get folks will still be able to access it, and we'll do some captions in Spanish too, just so it's more accessible too for everybody. But we do have a few folks in the waiting room, so I just wanted to check if there are any other questions before I start letting those folks in.
And let them
No,
in, 'cause
that's fine.
I can see that I can admit them or not.
As long as I have papers. Mexican papers though.
Alrighty, here they come.
All right. I'm glad we have an audience. That's great.
Even if it's 5 or 6, it's always big deal nowadays.
Oh, definitely.
Now,
Us
Mario
older people don't get on internet as much.
Buenas noches.
Everybody, buenas noches, welcome on in.
Hi, buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Y Mario Espinosa no se oye que hable.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Homero.
Buenas noches.
Y Hailey tampoco la veo. Evelyn y Sara. No. Les digo que ask to unmute.
Hola,
Muy
buenas noches.
Buenas noches. ¿Quién es? Evelyn.
Yo soy
Evelyn.
Evelyn.
Ok. Pues hay una duda. ¿Quieren English, Spanish, Spanglish? ¿Cómo quieren ver estas fotografías?
Antonio hasta habla chino.
También. Do you have any idea how you want?
I
how
think
you want this? Yeah.
I think the thing is for Valo to do like we did last time. No, you present me and I present Antonio.
Right, definitely. Yeah, so Alex can introduce Antonio, and then Antonio will introduce Marieta, and then he'll come back and take over. But this is Alex's show, so let's. I think English is fine, and because he can do captions in Spanish.
What I do want.
That's easier.
Yeah, what I do want everybody to know is that I would like them to eventually unmute so I can have a dialogue with the people that are participating. That's part of the way I've structured this this talk. So to me, it's very important that everybody participate. Because I see that sometimes you mute and you unmute, and we'll see how it goes. Let's get going. It's 9:04.
Sounds good. All right. So I just wanted to welcome everyone in. My name is Alex Espinoza Kulik, pronouns he, el. I'm the Executive Director for Corazon del Pueblo, a Cultural and Creative Arts Center of the Santa Maria Valley. We're really grateful that everyone came out tonight for our monthly community talk. I'm super excited that we'll be able to hear about some amazing photography and then have a chance to dialogue. And this is a great group for some good conversation. So really looking forward to that. Before we get started, I did want to just share one quick announcement. Unfortunately, it's kind of an upsetting one, which is that our Culture Center has actually been vandalized this week, including an art panel that we had out was damaged, so it's no longer usable. And then our Latinx little library, which folks who have know about our work or probably know about our free little library that we have on site. Somebody actually came through and dug that out and left it on the ground for us. So it's pretty upsetting, and I just wanted to let folks know that we are going to be looking for community support. So if you're able to join us this Friday, we're going to have a meeting for our, what we call the Arts for the People Committee. And how we can respond to this, directly as an organization. We need to get our little library back up there, but it's also time to show support in our community for our Culture Center and the work that we're doing, and that there's really no tolerance for these types of racist attacks on our community. So please join us if you're able, and we'll definitely be sharing more information on our social media about other ways that you can support. I did also put just now in the chat our donation link. So if you're able to help out, we're definitely going to need to invest in security and fixing up the things that were damaged. So every amount always helps. So please, if you're able to help us respond to this and really show that our Santa Maria Valley is for everyone. And especially for our Latinx community who works hard every day to provide food and all kinds of important work for our community. So, we're really grateful that we have a huge community of supporters, but we did want to let everyone know about that unfortunate news. And then Sarah asked in the chat, what time is the meeting? So that's going to be this Friday at 7 p.m. So, despite some of the bigotry and hatred that's out there, we continue on, and definitely I think this event is something that really showcases the strength of what we're doing. So I'm really excited that we're able to come together and focus on art and culture, the core of what we do, and lifting up this incredible work. So I'm honored to welcome our guests this evening, Antonio Turok and Maria del Carmen. We're very lucky to have them both here to share with us an engaging conversation. Antonio will be sharing with us about his brilliant photography taken showcasing the indigenous people of Mexico over the past few decades. He is an internationally acclaimed artist and the recipient of many grants and awards. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our guests. Thank you.
So, Marieta, are you gonna introduce?
Tú me presentas.
Well, first of all, to everybody, Happy New Year's, feliz año nuevo. Espero que esta comunidad avance, que tengan un año de mucha prosperidad, mucha creatividad. También quiero agradecer de todo corazón al doctor Álvaro Huerta, que hizo posible esta plática. Y es un honor que él esté aquí. Y también quiero presentar a mi estimada compañera de casi 30 años. Seguimos juntos, ya es una gran ventaja. Que se llama Marieta Bernstorff. So, I'll let Marieta, who's really a Chicana, she's one of yours. So I will.
Yo te Hi, I'm Marietta Bernstorff. I'm a curator. No, Maria del Carmen is my official name, but I go professionally by Marietta Bernstorff. And I'm a curator, artist, and activist. I have numerous projects. You can look online, Facebook, Instagram, all the projects that I'm working on. And one of the things that I've done as a curator for numerous years, and how I met Antonio, was I came to Mexico to curate an exhibition for various organizations in Los Angeles. At the time, I was working with Judy Baca at the Spark Social and Public Art Resource Center. Judy and is a longtime friend and activist with me. So I'm sort of here to set the mode for Antonio and what he does. I think the most important thing to think about when you're doing this, and especially after what you said, Alex, about what happened in your community, I think we forget sometimes that there is so much work to be done over and over and over again. And as we see Antonio's photography, we'll notice that even though he did this in a certain period of time, documentary photography, which had its heyday in a particular time, it's now coming back because it seems like we didn't learn anything historically throughout countries, both the United States, Mexico, Europe. There's still confusion about race and about identities and about sinners and how to help people. And one of the differences for us is that we live in Mexico, and Mexico has different struggles. And one that we always are curious about, and I've lived with all my life when I lived in the States, is the issue of color and identity that the United States has. I think one of the things that is interesting about looking at Antonio in this sense is that he's a nice Jewish boy who was born and raised in Mexico. So he's more Mexican than Mexicans. I'm a Mexican girl born and raised, born in Mexico and raised in Mississippi. So I'm the gringa. So just by looking at us, you see those differences, confusions of what people think Mexicans should be. And I think Antonio, throughout his years as one of Mexico's most important documentary photographers, is showing people, is really looking at the issues that he's documented throughout the years in indigenous communities, Central American wars, and as well as uprisings like the Oaxaca uprising, or issues like 9/11, the Trump era. He seems to always be there documenting these issues. And I think that's the power of the camera, the power of photography is images. When you begin to look at these, you'll begin to see a little bit what I'm saying with how powerful an image can do and how it can change the public opinion as it's done historically throughout time. So I think if we start looking at some of Antonio's work, and I'll be jumping in to help with Alvaro, talking about photography and talking about these movements that Antonio has documented throughout the years.
Thank you, Marietta. You're always wonderful. I mean, very articulate. Not like me.
So take it away, Antonio, with sharing your screen, and then you can start with the photos.
I just want to add one little element. I was invited on the 2nd of December of last year, just recently, a month to an extremely touching event, which was during the 70s. It was called La Guerra Sucia, in which the Mexican government went after different social leaders and executed them, killed them all. And amongst them was one of the more renowned one whose name was Lucio Cabañas. I have no idea if you know who Lucio Cabañas was. But he came out of Guerrero, and I happened to be invited to talk about these movements, these different revolutionary movements. And next to me were the parents of the 43 that had, that were executed and are still looking for their beloved children. So that was really, really touching. And basically, what came out of my gut and my heart was that this is a really extremely tragic event where a country cannot resolve who killed its children. And it's very painful. It's very painful that Mexico is going through this. And the reason that they wanted me to be one of the guest speakers at this event was because they wanted to refresh their memory of who they were and who we are as Mexicans. And the Zapatista movement has always been an important icon of recent struggles. So I just wanted to mention this because even though these photographs are going to be 30 years old, they are still extremely contemporary. I mean, especially in communities. And this is what I wanted to share with you. Now, what it means to work in a community? What is community? What's important to a community in their search for identity, their search for struggle, their search for how far you can be rebellious and and make a point. So with that, I hope it made sense what I just said, but it was real important for me that these photographs that I'm about to show you really have gone beyond me, and they're a reflection of a community, and that's why I think it's so important that you guys are willing to share with me these images, and maybe it's important for all of us. So I'm going to share my screen, and I want you to why not? ¿Qué hice, Paulo?
Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Now press click, double click on the PowerPoint. Where
On my
on the desktop, yeah.
Well, because you're hiding me. Oh, there, I see. Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
All right. Come on. Ábrete, Sésamo. We already rehearsed this. No puede ser. What? Get started with? No.
Yeah, click the red. You don't want that.
Skip read only mode. All right. Start your free trial. Which one do I want? Come on.
Continue with read only. Continue with read only.
Okay, next. Done. Now let's see. Come on.
Okay, good. There we are. So yeah, go to slideshow.
Can I see this?
Yeah, but go to go to where it says slideshow and then start from the beginning.
Is that
Yeah.
right?
Good. Yes. You're good.
And everybody can hear me?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to show you all the photographs without talking. And then I want each one of you to open up and your like Evelyn says that you're not here, but I know you're here. And we'll have a feedback about what you feel. I really want you to feel more than use your intellect. I want you to just feel when you go through these images. Okay, let's get going.
Maybe a little slower, Tony.
¿Qué pasó? Okay. Sounds a lot of things happening here, but I would like someone to tell me which one would you like the conversation to start with? Who wants to be the brave person to get involved?
I think one of the photographs that looked at Comandante Ramona, talking with the woman.
The Comandante Ramona.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what Antonio usually does is when someone picks something, he'll just tell a story about that one.
So, okay, we're talking about this image.
Yeah, that's what she said.
All right, who am I talking to?
Evelyn.
Okay, well, you know, this is a most amazing image. If we understand indigenous culture in its most classic sense, women are not generally invited to be part of the political structure of the community. So so what happened here was that men and women decided that they had had enough, the ya basta. And the ya basta meant that if indigenous culture in Mexico wanted to survive, it needed to stand up and protest. It needed to say, we are human beings. We're not animals. Because there was a lot of racism back in the 90s. A lot of the people of Chiapas, most of them didn't even know how to speak Spanish, let alone read it. So there was, you know, lots and lots of suffering. And then Chiapas was really considered one of the poorest regions of Mexico and possibly maybe even of Latin America. So had it not been for Ramona, okay, it probably would have been very difficult for this revolt to have taken place. She had to address all the women of the indigenous communities, because there's, when I refer to indigenous communities, I'm also referring to 8 languages, separate languages that are spoken in Chiapas. These are like nations, right? There's 8 different nations who speak completely different languages. So she had to address all these nations and say, it's time to rise up and fight for a cause. And the cause was really quite simple. I mean, the same demands that I think most poor people want. You know, they want to be, first of all, respected and included in society. They wanted equal rights for women and men. They wanted more schools, more you know, access to medicine. So had it only been the men who had taken up arms, I don't believe that this revolt would have happened. So I do think this is one of the most important images of this collection and of this story. It's about women in the 20th century standing up against all odds. Does anybody want to comment?
I just wanted to comment and say I really appreciate that story and sharing about Comandante Ramona. When I saw this image appear, I felt a sense of hope, and like I just felt like, you know, like this weird sense of comfort, maybe if like if we're, I'm not sticking to my intellectual side for today. So just on based on my feelings, I felt like safe when I saw this, especially after I think a few photos before this, it looked like what to be a cross and people in hoods. And after, yeah, and that made me feel fear. And just sort of reminiscent of the KKK on this side of 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 the world. So yeah, when I saw Comandante Ramona, I felt like, things are going to be okay. Our women are warriors, right? They a nation wouldn't survive without women. And I think that inspiration is also what I would say came up for me.
Well, it's interesting that you would pinpoint to this picture of, it looks like the Ku Klux Klan. And this photograph is inspired by a very brilliant and wonderful Chiapaneca writer. Her name was Rosario Castellanos. And she had a small little short story that said there was no difference between the Ku Klux Klan and her people. Okay, her people referring to the white, Ladino, mestizo. And yes, this is really scary because when anybody puts a hood on, you know it's a secret society. And you know that obviously, they represented what the Ku Klux Klan represents, which is white supremacy, racism towards everything that's not the same as your own. And they said it very clearly during the 1994 revolt. They said that these people had to disappear in order for the indigenous people to succeed. And there's a lot of stories about, and I lived them. I mean, if we backtrack just a little bit and we look at, some of these images of indigenous culture, I mean, we really observe here something that's, just so magical, just so really humanistically fascinating. This culture is so different to ours, and it's truthfully horrifying to believe that other cultures cannot, look up to this and say, I want to know more about these people. I want to know what their belief system is. What do they believe in? That was probably one of the reasons I stayed in Chiapas for 30 years. And that was that I was always fascinated by the Maya culture. If you think about how far back their civilization goes back 5,000 years, which is, amazing. They are the first culture on the planet to understand that the world was round, that that we went around the sun, not that the sun was around, us. They had a mathematical concept of zero. So yes, these are millennial cultures that have so much to offer us. And this is one of the main reasons why I stayed for as long as I did, for 30 years. And I feel very grateful that they would accept me to be the first photographer, for the revolt. I mean,
Yeah, before the revolt, somebody wants, if you can comment on the girls prancing or the young girls.
this one,
Yeah, that one. Yeah, someone liked that one. I think Melanie
well,
liked. Can you
well,
just
I
give us a
mean-
story behind that one?
Yeah, that was me. That's the one that I like the most. I don't know. It was I
okay,
like
well,
seeing the woman with the baby carrying the baby like that. I don't know. I just yeah.
But this is an extremely fun picture, okay? And it's a complex picture. If you look at the history of indigenous photography, you will notice that they very rarely will smile at a camera. I don't know if you are familiar with that. They always have like this very solemn, very, like serious look. But it's not that they're serious. They're actually very playful people. I mean, there's a lot of double meaning, sexual jokes going on in the community, just like us. We're just human beings. There's nothing. But the reason that they hide their teeth is because in their culture, showing your teeth is showing the sign of death. Because when you die, in Spanish, they say, si la muerte te pela los dientes. So if you look at the older women back here, I guess they knew me well enough to know that I was gonna, try to get them to laugh so I could take the photograph. And of course, they immediately were, especially the one, can you see this one here? Her name is Rosha. I mean, she's, and Micaela, and, so I was able to get them to laugh. And that's a very unique, unique moment, because they don't like you, they don't mind being photographed, they just don't like to show their teeth because it's a representation of death. But yes, they're very extremely wonderful people, just full of their heart. You go to their communities, and if there's one chicken, they'll kill it just because you arrived at their community. They'll share it with you. That's unheard of, in today's day and age. People don't think about that anymore.
Gracias, Antonio. Mario wants to know a little bit more about, or the one he liked is Amanecer. And if Mario, if you want to say something, it's optional.
Well,
and
what does who asked me about this image?
That's I think
That
it's
was-
Melanie.
Yeah, that was me.
What do you think of what I said, Melanie?
I think that I think that that's why it stood out to me, because you're right. Most pictures of like indigenous people, they do tend to like seem serious and stuff like that. And I just like seeing that like the women felt comfortable and they were smiling. I think that that's what really impacted me. I don't know. It was just really nice to see them just walking and just being happy. I don't know.
Well, but that also comes from spending years going to their community. I mean, to get to that level of acceptance means that that you're part of their world, and then that's
Yeah.
something you can't just walk into a community and have them react this way.
Yeah, no, I think that like the picture captures that too, because it's they feel it. I don't know. It's like they feel comfortable, and yeah, that's also what I like, that it looks they feel comfortable and they're just having they're good.
Yeah, and it just shows that human beings are human beings, and a good joke is a good joke here and anywhere else. So, which amanecer.
Yeah,
is,
that's Mario. Maybe if Mario wants to say something, it's optional.
Yeah, Amanecer, it stood out to me, one, because I'm afraid of heights, but Two, because I wonder how that all happened. It looks like a very coordinated effort, but to get and hang on what looks like a branch, it seems, it just kind of made me feel kind of like I was on a roller coaster. But I wanted to know a little bit more about that.
Well, this is one of the very oldest of my images in this collection. 1974. And I was invited to a ceremony of a community that was going to be given land way in the jungle. I mean, this is so deep in the jungle that we had to walk 7 days in pure jungle. And there had to be a guide, because by the time you try to backtrack, the jungle had already eaten up your trail. And this, to me, was like really getting to know what the immensity of what the jungle was like. I mean, today, if you go to the same community, there's a 4-lane highway there that was built by the Mexican government, because the trees behind this one here is Guatemala. So they had to, the Mexican government had to create what's it called? A autopista fronteriza for security, supposedly security reasons. But it really wasn't that. What they did was that they built that road in order to go and exploit all the great Lacandon jungle. And they totally, destroyed the jungle. And I really
When the
love this.
jungle, let me, you can tell them, in the jungle, when you arrived, the percentage of the jungle was how much, Antonio?
Well, the government in that year, 1974, it all belonged to one little group of indigenous people called Lacandon. There were 200 of them, and they were the owners of the whole jungle. And they were granted, for protection reasons, the World Bank promised Mexico that they would give them money if they protected that piece of jungle, that they would give them money in exchange for the protection of this jungle, of which the Mexican government did not do that. They basically started sending, these are people that obviously moved from the highlands of Chiapas, right? Because there was no more lands left for them to be distributed in their place of origin. So the easiest way to deal with land issues was to just give them national land.
But the
And so-
percentage when you arrived was about 60. Today, the percentage is how much? 20, maybe?
of-
Of the jungle that's left.
Oh, I don't even
Because
think
cattle-
there's 20,
Yeah, it's
I don't
like,
even think there's 20% left. It's a
because there
complete
was,
disaster.
there used to be the cattle ranches, now there's mining. I mean, these are,
Even these indigenous people they didn't have the knowledge that the Lacandon people had, which meant that, they had survived in that jungle for, thousands of years, and they knew how to survive off the land, which means you had to rotate. You had to understand plants so that you could cure yourself. And that was not what happened. Basically, what the Mexican government, what a few politicians did was take advantage of, destroying thousands and thousands of hectares. Half the jungle was destroyed in a small period of time between 1974 and when the Zapatista uprising took place, and 20 years later, they had destroyed that entire forest. And it was the largest green forest in North America. So, I don't know how to express it. It's a very tragic story. But it is the story of Brazil. It's the story of Latin America. It's
Or
something
I'd say it's the world story is what we were saying, that sometimes people don't learn. Sometimes people disconnected so much from land issues. The most important thing for the United States is to understand that the reason that there's immigrants and working in the fields and picking their food is that they have food for that reason, because these people know about the land. Most people wouldn't even know what to do if they had to farm themselves. It's been eliminated from the memory of most people. And so it's so important to maintain what you've done is document these issues. You're a documentary photographer that documents important issues that occurred during time, like this image of the oil destruction.
This poor man, we stopped him, and he says, I'm so depressed because I used to live off fishing. Now there's no more fish left. What for? Why did we have to destroy it all is what I can see written all over his face. Just that sense of despair of just saying, this is madness, this is hell. Just no future. And
Alex wants to know about going to a new picture, the Año Nuevo in San Cristobal. Yeah.
well, here it is.
I don't know if Alex wants to say something before you comment.
Yeah, come on, Alex.
Yeah, this one very much jumped out to me. And then when I saw the title, I was like, I don't know, that's what the new year felt like this year. But I know there's, so I'm just curious to hear what the context was for this one.
No, but that's an interesting reflection. You think that the United States is at the verge of having a new year like this?
Well, I just feel I know I didn't hear anyone talking about making resolutions. I feel like everyone is just like we're here, we're in it, we're being held hostage by this pandemic. This is the new year, right? It's this sort of sense of control, almost social control.
Well, I'm always fascinated by history. And to me, what is mind-boggling is that just 1 year ago, white supremacists were, charging into the capital of the world, the most powerful nation in the world, and nothing seemed to have, happened. Is that a green light for a civil war in the United States is my question. So to me, this is as contemporary for Latin America as the images you see of people storming, the Capitol and nothing happening. Is the United States really reached its limit of as a major we used to say that it was the most powerful nation in the world, but if it cannot stand up to its historical importance, it's destined to disappear. That's what's so frightening about these kind of images. The difference is that in this case, I see a sense of hope. In the United States, I don't see a sense of hope. But they're very similar in that strange sense of despair, of having to go to the worst, the worst situation is having to go to war. That's the last resource you have. But I was so happy for these people. I joined, and I'm still a big fan, even though I'm a pacifist and I don't believe in arms being the best solution. I can't also not say that a nation doesn't, or like this, people, organized people don't have the right to defend themselves. And in this case, they were being exploited, they were being killed, they didn't have access to language, to schools, to education. So yes, it's justifiable to pick up arms. And
Yeah, one thing.
It's more of like a self-defense, I would say. This is Alvaro. Okay, so Sarah has her hand up, and then we'll go to the chat with Victoria. So why don't we see what Sarah has to say, and then we'll go back to the chat with Victoria's favorite, or one picture she wants to know more about.
I would
Okay.
like to know about the refugee photo of all the massive humankind. That one.
okay, the reason I include this chapter is that, I mean, one of the worst massacres in Latin American history was the massacre of indigenous cultures of Guatemala, where it's considered that 250,000 indigenous people were executed in Guatemala during a period of 6 years, which makes it the worst. And I mean, worse than, Chile, worse than Argentina, worse than 250. And it was by this maniac called Rios Montt. He had his own church called La Iglesia del Verbo. And if you understand the translation of it's, I mean, I don't know, how would you translate Iglesia del Verbo?
Would be the Church of the Word, the Church of the
Yeah,
Word.
but the word in that would be the la definición textual, pero la definición filosófica y de doble sentido, verbo es la demagogia. So this is, but the reason I include this image so I don't get lost is that the Zapatista uprising came across to Chiapas because these are the same people. I mean, these are all Maya nations coming together. And these are the first contact of people standing up for their rights. So this image was really quite unique. This became the iconic image for UNICEF for about 5 years or 10 years, somewhere there. They used this as a poster to talk about refugees.
Was the United States responsible in any way for all this?
Oh, what do you think of?
I know that because probably the Northern Triangle business,
Yeah. I mean, but United, I mean, and I have a whole story of, I spent the whole decade of the 80s and 90s in Central America. And we know that the US was directly involved in this dirty war. We know it. I mean, you know, I mean,
But
the
it was
reason
also part of the religious, he was an evangelist, Rios Montt. And the person who came and gave him all that philosophy was the famous American evangelist. Think of the name of two really famous older guys who went around the world preaching.
Billy Graham.
Pat Robertson.
Billy
or
Graham. Billy Graham.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, he went
Oh,
around.
that puts a whole lot of different spin on that, because you know, with Franklin Graham's group is Samaritans First.
Yeah. Well, they were doing, the problem is that when you go in and preach something and you, that doesn't mean that the other person that you're preaching to turns it into the same thing. Basically, they were cleansing, no, Antonio? They were cleansing, getting
Well,
rid of the people who,
basically what they wanted was the resources. You see, there was,
Yeah.
it all boils down to this absurd phobia of thinking that all these communities were communists and that they were gonna, you know, take over Latin America, and they wouldn't have access to the natural resources, which they were used to. Just, you know, they considered Latin America a banana republic, you know, and they had the right to go in and, you know, take
Exactly.
whatever they thought was theirs. And so every time a group stood up with a little bit of dignity and say enough is enough, the United States intervened. And
Yeah, Victoria wants to know a little bit more about this photo.
Thank you.
This
I mean,
photo, right, Victoria?
well, this was
Sorry, there is another one. I think that there is a
Oh.
woman stand up and a little girl is crying. Yeah, that one.
Oh, okay, yeah, let's go to that one better.
well, I mean, this has so many implications. This is the sacred Maya tree called La Ceiba, which means that during that period, the Guatemalans were hired to come in and completely devastate the jungle. Because all of this was jungle 10 years before I took this photograph. And so, of course, the Mexican owners had them clear up the land so they could bring cattle in. But I mean, it's such a strange moment because it's so theatrical, but it's not something that I could have invented. I didn't ask the little girl to have that attitude. I didn't have, you know, it was like, I don't know, it's one, I guess that's what the power of photography could be.
Yes.
Where you're lucky to have a feeling that there's something dramatic happening, and you take the photograph, and then when you look at the negatives, you realize that yes, this was, you know, it's her looking at the last tree. It's you know, is that the end? Is this little girl really, you know, just in complete awe of, you know, not knowing what her future is? I mean, there's a lot of reading to this image.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, does anybody else want to add to? I mean, add
I would like.
words?
Well, I would like to mention about that photograph because I have the opportunity to be in Guatemala many times, and also in the time, I think that we were there too after 1 year or 2 years after the killing of the priest in El Salvador.
Yeah.
And so after that, we have opportunity to go to Guatemala, and some of these photographs that you are showing me bring me so much painful about the situation of Guatemala. And I remember sometimes when we were traveling in the countryside, seeing militaries, a spot of militaries in checking every single car. And we heard so much about the people who, many of them, they were missing. And so when I see all this, I think that I have a lot of respect about the Guatemala community, the Guatemalan people, because they suffer a lot. But the experience that I have when I was there and traveled for this small community is the resilience that they have. They continue working, they continue having each other. And I like those photographs that you present with and you describe about the faces of these women smiling, because as you know, many of them, they don't see you directly in the face. They just, most of the time, their eyes are seeing the ground, you know. And that is one of the things that when they come to the United States, many of Guatemalans, especially the ones who work in the farms, they are really shy, you know. But most of all is with this collection of photographs, you can see the struggle in many ways, you know, of the people. And thank you so much, Mario and Antonio, for bringing this incredible photograph. It's just incredible. I really enjoy in somehow, not in the how that I'm happy to know, but to bring so much story and history of these incredible people from Guatemala and in many other places in Latin America. Thank you so much.
No, I
it's
thank
great.
you for reacting this way, because it's, I always have this feeling of, you know, can we learn from history? Have we learned anything from history? Can we break away from all so much tragedy? I mean, when I took this photograph, I mean, you know, it was so natural for her. I mean, she didn't mind. And that was something that was so amazing about Guatemalan people. They were the most open-minded, lovable. And after they lost the war, they lost their soul. Something happened.
Yes.
It's so tragic now. I don't know if Guatemala could ever really go back to its, you know, to that joyful, you know, just open-minded. I mean, one of the reasons they lost was that they were just good people, and there was no evil in them, and the Guatemalan government would and army would just come in and slaughter entire communities. I have that whole, I mean, I don't put it, I'm a little bit hesitant to show those images because it's just, but I'll quickly try to tell you a story of one of the great massacres of Guatemala. It was a small town in the Petén jungle called Dos R's, the 2 R's, Dos R's. And that was 1982, and the Pope was arriving. Juan Pablo II was arriving in Guatemala City, and he present the execution of 6 supposed guerrillas, guerrilleros, and they were executed in the basurero de Guatemala. And then all of a sudden journalists started to come, and all of a sudden I was working with a journalist from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I was his photographer and his translator. And he says, let's go out to the jungle. And we arrived at this site where they had taken all the women and children, put them inside the town hut, lit it. It was made out of straw, lit it in fire, and of course they began to yell at the women, if you're that immortal, you can resist fire, right? So most women, well, with their children, went out, and of course then the order was to execute them, and were machine gunned down. The men were all taken, and they were lined up on the trees of the jungle, and the new soldiers had to learn how to execute them. And so there was what was called el corte chaleco, and if you understand chaleco in Spanish, it's something that doesn't have long sleeves. It's what's it called? You know, a suit, but without long sleeves. So the young soldiers had to cut the 2 limbs off, and then the head, and the head had to fall on top of the 2. So I have those images. I went in there within a few weeks after that massacre, and I had those images. I was able to go in and come out with, alive and have those images. So many years later, Rigoberta Menchú came to my house and asked me if she could have those photographs. And I said, of course. I printed them all up, and they were supposed to be used for taking Rios Montt to The Hague to be processed as a war criminal, not like a Nazi war in The Hague. Well, I remember that weeks went by, and all of a sudden one day I was watching CNN, and all of a sudden I began seeing my horrifying pictures of these women, all slaughtered, and the men being executed in the jungle. And that was as far as any justice was ever committed for those massacres of Rios Montt. I mean, I have that documentation. I always wonder if I do right by not showing them, or what is the obligation of a photographer? I mean, why do you do these kind of images? I mean,
Yeah.
I have such a hard time in today's day and age trying to understand myself what all this means.
It's a balance. Linda has a question, and I think with all these images, we need to balance both the horror, but also the resistance of the people and the beauty. Linda has a question, or her hand up.
Hello.
Hello.
I just want to know if you can talk a little bit more about the image bañándose en el río.
Well, it's the reason I use it, maybe I shouldn't also, because I'm invading a woman's kind of personal little, it's women washing their clothes. Now, the reason I included is because they kind of invited me to take that image. I mean, if you look at all my images, I've never taken an image and I was not invited to participate. So they obviously enjoyed that they were sharing with the rest of the world what their culture is about. Their culture didn't have the same connotation and moral, because in the United States, everything has a double moral standard. And when you look at this image, you realize that there was no double moral. There was no problem showing your breast, culturally speaking. So that's the reason I show it, is to make an emphasis on just how different cultures can be, and how for one culture, showing yourself the way you are is not a problem, but maybe in a different context, it might be. I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, that's why I wanted to know more about it, because it is a very intimate moment. And then, like you said, it's different here in the US as far as like consent and everything. And I just wanted to know like how that works in photography in general, and specifically with the community, how you said you were invited in.
Yeah, I mean, she would have immediately tried
Yeah.
to hide her. If she didn't want that photograph taken, she would have immediately, put her hands in a position, or turned around, or, she was very content showing, that natural sense of, look at,
It's I think a lot of but it's a complication for a lot of people in the United States, because those hangups of sexuality or bodies, you can go into any museums as a curator. I'm amazed at the difference. Like, you go to Mexico or Latin America and you see much more artwork without issues of, can children see it or can teenagers see it? There isn't those problems like they are in the United States, where where they have more problems with sexualities in the United States, and less problems where people find it all to be normal to look at these imagery. It's a very strange thing that that a country that's so free has the hardest time to be free.
So this Victorian philosophy. Alex, can you let us know, because right now it's 8:14, how much more time Antonio has? And that way, once we know, he can proceed.
Yeah. Thank you, Antonio, for sharing that. I know you were kind of questioning, like, if you think you should share the picture or not. I think it's good, to emphasize that, to kind of like everything's super like hypersexualized, and to just the women feel it's just a different culture, and I think it's important for people to see that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I hope I don't. I mean, I know that it's such a sensitive topic now. I mean, when you I definitely are aware of women's. I mean, I live with someone who reminds me every day of my existence, of what women's rights are. And if it wasn't for the feminist movements, I mean, there'd be no future left for the planet. It's women taking power and saying enough is enough. What is sad is that something gets lost along the way.
Speaking of women taking power, can you talk a little, because we only have 15 more minutes. Can you talk a little bit about the woman with the flower, the resistance? I'm thinking hopefully we can balance like I said, the horror, but also like the resistance and how our people are very, they don't give up, so that way we don't end on a sad note, but it's just a question of hope and keep fighting.
Well, I mean, this is like such an iconic image. I mean, we see women always the ones standing up in front of the military power and saying enough is, and she was yelling at them, mi casa no es un burdel, my house is not a whorehouse, get the hell out of here, and has a flower. I mean, that's iconic. I mean, that is the most powerful statement of a revolt, when women stand up and say, we're not your whores, get out of here. That is, to me, a sense of hope. It's just a very humble person saying, you're gonna have to step over me in order to, you're gonna have to kill me in order for me to stop.
I think they should know what occurred, what was happening in 2006 here. This is Oaxaca. And it was the uprising, the civil uprising that occurred in Oaxaca against the professors, the teachers, the union, and the government. There was an uprising, and who came to back all these teachers were a lot of young people who were also, everybody came together to fight for justice and help the teachers. And it was under siege for 8 months, Oaxaca, without any law. And actually it ran really well.
Actually, I
Antonio,
have to say, it's one of the best, and I felt the most secure under rebel law than I ever have under government law. I mean, there was a sense of justice, so continue, Marieta.
I think that the positive note that Alvaro is saying, the positive note is that even though you've documented and you've seen some horrific things as a documentary photographer, you never lose hope, because to try to change the world and that's the most important thing to remember. It's like, even if you see it, you have to keep changing. Even if you see that they destroy your space, you have to keep putting it back up and showing people that you don't give up, that you don't stop, because that would be the end. And so we have to keep going, and especially for your generation, especially the young people, it's so important for us older people to keep saying, we keep fighting, you have to keep fighting, we all have to keep fighting to make these changes occur, and not settle for greed and for violence, but to make changes occur.
I mean, the world is up against, and this is something that I really emphasize on these talks, and that is, it's up to you young kids to fight what's happening, with global warming. You're gonna have to stand, if you want to, to live on this planet, you're gonna have to speed it up, and you're gonna have to, stand up and say, there is global warming is a reality. We have to do something about it. And what I see on your page is that one of the great thing about your organization is you're really putting an emphasis on community organization, organizing as a community. And to me, you're my heroes. I mean, I know that there has to be organization like yours who look at history and say, yes, we can organize ourselves and confront what's going to happen in the future and work as a community. So I think this is what I try to do with these lectures, is try to motivate, these you young kids to feel that you can empower yourself and not be afraid to go up and say, enough is enough. I hope that makes sense. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you for clapping.
And I think this is why it's so important what Alex was saying, that even though the group is being attacked, that the community comes together and resist and don't end what you're doing, because what you're doing is the right thing to do, especially in this time period. And there's people out there, they're always going to be against us, but I think there's more of us than them. So it's just a matter of us organizing ourselves and fighting back.
Well,
Um,
like you, Alvaro, you're
mhm.
a big organizer. You've been doing that for many, many years.
Mhm.
And I want to just mention that one thing that's really amazing is how, we've lived in Oaxaca for the last 20 something years, and Antonio in Chiapas before that. But one of the things that's very powerful here is how the indigenous communities have survived under the worst situations because they have built a bond of community called comunalidad. And that comunalidad means that everybody in the community has to participate and make their community stronger. Schools, rivers, sewage. You have to participate, even if you live in the States. You have to send money, or you have to figure out how you're going to participate to continue to be part of these communities. And one thing that is very obvious is when the Oaxacans go to the Los Angeles, they build community like they do here. And that's really important for keeping language alive, keeping their traditions alive, keeping their arts and culture alive. It's building that community so that you don't lose it and you don't just become what a lot of you are called these new names in the States. You have to keep up. We have to keep up with a dictionary. Hispanic, Latinx, there's so many terms. And the truth is, it's the culture you come from, the identity is about all people, all community, everyone in it, man or woman, of any gender, of any choice. It's important to build community to keep your culture and your language and your history alive.
Muchas gracias, Marieta and Antonio. I know if Alex, because you're the jefe here, if you want to kind of guide us here towards the end of the plática.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just grabbing a link because I did want to give a shout out to the MICOP here in the Central Coast, the Mixteco the Mixteco Indígena Community Organizing Project, because they're doing a lot of that same work in our area here in Santa Maria and on the Central Coast. So I just added that link to the chat. If folks aren't familiar with that organization, definitely check them out and follow the work that they're doing as well. And I also just wanted to thank, on behalf of everybody here, thank Antonio for sharing, Marietta and Alvaro for facilitating the conversation. And, I think it is so important that we reflect on all of the different history, right, that can inspire us, all of the folks who have stood up, right, and continue to stand up for justice, for the voices who haven't been heard, for those folks who have been taken advantage of or exploited or committed violence against. And so it is a global movement that we're a part of, and it's so beautiful to see that reflected in these photos and through this conversation. So, I'm really grateful that we have these platforms where we can have these, transnational dialogues and learn from each other in this process. I also wanted to put in the chat, if you don't already follow us at Corazon, please check us out on Instagram, Facebook, or on our website to get email updates through our newsletter. We do community talks every month. We also have our Cafe Cultura events, our arts workshops, and various campaigns that you can get involved in. So if you're feeling inspired, I'd encourage you to join with us. We're, depending on traffic, 3 or 4 hours to the northern side of LA, at least.
With traffic, it could be 30 or 40 hours.
Exactly.
Well,
You do
maybe-
wonderful work, your entire team. ¿Qué pasó, Antonio?
No, I would love to go out there and say hello to you personally.
Eventually, we'll have to travel there.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I
And
think
keep in mind that in the near future, we'll have a lot of activities for people that would like to come to Oaxaca to take some classes with Antonio or myself. We work within communities. And we'll send you a link to all the pages.
Please do. Yes, I'd love to help facilitate those connections, and other folks that are here. If you want to be part of that, definitely let us know, and we'll make sure everybody can be in touch, because these conversations definitely need to continue, and would love to see more exchange and interaction.
A lot of the faith communities would like to be able to learn more. And I'm part of the Poor People's Campaign.
Okay. So, but what would you do, Sarah, in such a small little community? What's your job?
Well, I'm an unemployed social justice advocate. So I'm working, and right now my internet died at my house, and I'm very low. So I'm at the Democratic headquarters, and this is where I'm hanging out, doing my internet and all my social justice work. I am a member of the California Poor People's Campaign, and
Fabulous.
just
Your obligation is to get internet into all these communities. Isn't that what part of the Democratic platform is? I think it's great.
Yeah, but it's also, but with my Poor People's Campaign, it really touches my heart, because it's a fusion movement, and we need all the help we can get, and it's lifelong work. Oh, Vera,
right.
do you know what Nancy Berlin?
No.
Okay. I was thinking, where do you live?
In Los Angeles?
Oh, cool.
I grew up in East LA, so I might have stolen her car or something. Oh, we're still being
I
recorded?
don't think so, but you live in Tongva land.
Yeah, yes.
Because guys, we've got to remember our land acknowledgements. Come on, we're in the
definitely.
land of the Chumash.
Well, we're this group is like they said in that one movie, where somos pocos pero locos, this is a small group here. Fortunately, Alex will post this video. We're all very lucky to have Antonio with us, and during this time period, as like Marietta said, he's one of Mexico's greatest photographers, period. And with everything that's happening in the world, with COVID, everything, we don't know when someone is here today and gone tomorrow. So when we have the opportunity to have someone like him sharing community with Marietta, who's done a great job over the last 30 years or more in the arts and activism. So this is kind of what it's all about. And Alex, I'm sure with your leadership and everybody else in the community, feel free, post the video and get more people to plug into it.
We'll
and also
send you
to promote.
We'll send you some links to some of the pages so you can see more.
And also for us to help you promote your group too.
You remind his photographies reminds me so much of Dorothea Lange.
Yes, well, there's no doubt about it that's one of the great photographic and historical. I mean, it changed us. Our generation was definitely influenced by that whole project. I mean, the farm security.
Yeah.
I mean, it made photography be as so important up to today. I mean, it hadn't been for them leading the way. So
if one thing sorry to interrupt, the most famous iconic picture of a woman in the farm worker Dust Bowl area was taken in Napomo, and that's just a few miles away north of Santa Maria. So guys, that's our link to you.
I always thought that was like out in the middle of nowhere up in where
It was
was
a dust storm. It was a dust storm. I mean, it was
No,
doing the Dust Bowl.
they migrated out
Yeah, to California.
to California. And
Well,
so
the homeroom bell is gonna ring. So Alex, why don't you sign us off and then we'll all stay in touch.
yes,
Sounds
Yes,
good.
and all the best for you Americans.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you so
you.
much for joining us, and
so
we
much.
have us on-
Lots of hugs and lots of success. And please don't give up.
Thank you.
Never.
Never.
Evening. Thanks, everyone.
Nunca.
Yeah.
All right.
Sí se puede.
See you Friday night at the meeting.
Sounds good. Buenas
Alright.
noches.
We can get it out.
Yes.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.